The lights are out. Your phone has no signal. You hear people talking outside, but you can't make out what they're saying, so your brain starts filling in the gaps. You look through the window. 3 houses away, someone is standing in a driveway. Another person walks past with a flashlight. You can't tell what they're doing. Then you notice your neighbor's garage door is open. Yesterday, that wouldn't have meant anything. Tonight, it feels different. You look at the supplies inside your house. Water, food, batteries, fuel. Everything you prepared for. And suddenly, one thought enters your mind. What if someone knows you have them? You close the curtains, lock the door, and tell yourself you're only being careful. But something subtle has already changed. You're no longer preparing for the emergency. You're preparing for everyone else. And that difference can change an entire neighborhood. At first, nobody thinks the outage is going to last. The power has gone out before. A storm knocked it down. A transformer failed. A line came down somewhere. Usually, you wait. 20 minutes, maybe an hour. Then the lights come back. So that's what everyone does. They wait. Children look out the windows. People step onto porches. Someone starts a generator. A neighbor walks down the street with a flashlight and tells everyone the same thing. It'll probably be back soon. Nobody knows if that's true, but everyone wants to believe it, because uncertainty is easier to tolerate when somebody gives it a deadline. 1 hour becomes 2. 2 becomes 4. Then something changes. The cell network starts becoming unreliable. Messages fail to send. Internet connections disappear. The neighborhood becomes quieter. And the quiet creates a problem of its own. You can no longer easily tell what's happening outside your house. Normally, information is everywhere. Traffic, phones, television, social media, news alerts. The constant stream of people talking around you. Without those things, the neighborhood becomes an information vacuum. And human beings are extremely uncomfortable with information vacuums. So the brain starts doing what it naturally does. It fills in the missing pieces. Around midnight, you hear a car. It slows down, stops, then drives away. You don't know who it was, or why it stopped. Maybe someone was looking for a family member. Maybe they were checking on an elderly relative. Maybe they were simply turning around. But you don't know. And because you don't know, your mind chooses an explanation, not necessarily the most accurate one, the one that feels safest. Someone could be checking houses. Someone could be looking for supplies. Someone could be taking advantage of the darkness. You check the lock again, then a second time. By morning, almost everyone has slept badly, but something else has changed. People are beginning to talk differently. A neighbor says they heard someone was breaking into houses. Another says a store nearby was emptied. Someone else claims the authorities aren't telling people the truth. Nobody knows where the information started, but the rumor doesn't need a reliable source to become powerful. It only needs to sound possible. The second morning feels different. The sun comes up, but the normal world doesn't. Traffic is lighter. Businesses are closed. The refrigerator is warming. The water pressure has changed. Your phone still has almost no service. Now people are beginning to realize this isn't just an inconvenience. It's a systems problem. The power system isn't isolated. It supports or enables countless other systems that normally work quietly in the background. Water treatment and pumping, fuel distribution, retail, transportation, refrigeration, communications. When those systems begin losing power or communication, the effects don't arrive all at once. They arrive in layers. First, convenience disappears. Then certainty. Then access. And eventually, trust. That last one is easy to underestimate because when people lose access to reliable information, they start relying more heavily on the people around them. But that only works if they trust those people. And trust is already beginning to weaken. By the afternoon, you make a decision. You stop telling people what you have. It seems completely reasonable. You have limited water, limited food, limited fuel. You don't know how long the emergency will last, so you keep your supplies private. Your neighbor asks if you know where water is available. You say you don't know, but you do. Earlier, you found out that a community center a few streets away is distributing water. You don't tell them. Not because you want them to suffer. You simply don't know what they might do with the information. Maybe they'll tell 10 people. Those 10 tell another 100, and the supply disappears before you have another chance to get it. So you keep quiet. From your perspective, the decision makes sense. But your neighbor doesn't see your reasoning. They only see the result. You knew something. You didn't tell them. That creates the first crack. And here's what matters. Nobody has done anything obviously evil. Nobody has attacked anyone. Nobody has stolen anything. A person simply made a defensive decision under uncertainty, and someone else interpreted that decision as evidence. This is the first major psychological turning point. The danger isn't necessarily coming from an attacker. It's beginning with interpretation. By the second night, rumors are spreading faster than facts. Someone says a truck carrying supplies was attacked. Someone else says the authorities are preparing to shut down the entire area. Another person says the outage could last weeks. Nobody can verify any of it. But people begin acting as though the rumors are true. Generators become louder. Doors stay closed. People stop gathering outside. And the neighborhood becomes less visible to itself. When you regularly see your neighbors, their behavior is familiar. You know who walks their dog. You know which car belongs to which family. You know who works nights, who has children, who usually sits outside in the evening. That familiarity gives ordinary behavior context. But when everyone disappears behind locked doors, that context disappears too. Now every unfamiliar movement stands out. A flashlight crossing a driveway becomes suspicious. A car arriving late becomes suspicious. Someone carrying a backpack becomes suspicious. A generator running after midnight becomes suspicious. The behavior hasn't necessarily changed. Your interpretation of it has. And that's when a neighborhood can start turning against itself without anyone consciously deciding to do so. On the third day, you see your neighbor carrying several containers toward their house. You recognize them, water containers. You immediately wonder where they got the water. You watch them disappear inside. Later, another neighbor mentions seeing the same thing. Where are they getting it? Nobody knows. Someone suggests they must have found a private supply. Another says they've probably been storing water for months. Someone else says they may have access to a delivery truck. Within an hour, a simple observation has become a story. Your neighbor has water. Apparently, they know where to get more. But they aren't sharing the information. Suddenly, people begin wondering whether they're hiding something, preparing to leave, or taking more than their share. The evidence hasn't changed. Only the interpretation has. And this is how suspicion grows. It doesn't always require a lie. Sometimes it begins with incomplete information. That evening, you move your generator farther inside the property. You don't want people to know exactly where the sound is coming from. Again, the decision seems reasonable. But now your neighbor hears the generator. They don't see it. They don't know what you're powering. They don't know how much fuel you have. They only know that your house appears unusually quiet while the rest of the street is dark. So they make their own assumption. Maybe you're hiding supplies. Maybe you have more than everyone else. Maybe you've been preparing for this longer than you admitted. And now they begin making decisions based on what they think you're doing. They stop talking to you. They tell another neighbor to be careful. That neighbor tells someone else. And suddenly, your attempt to stay unnoticed has made you more suspicious. This is the paradox. The more people hide because they're afraid of being targeted, the less information everyone else has. And the less information people have, the more room there is for suspicion. By the fourth day, the neighborhood doesn't look like a disaster zone. There are no burning buildings, no massive crowds, no movie-style collapse. There are simply people behind doors, conserving water, watching windows, and listening for sounds outside. And that's what makes the situation dangerous. The biggest threat isn't necessarily an outside attacker. It's the breakdown of shared information. Because once people stop trusting what they hear from one another, every decision becomes harder. Do you share water? Tell someone where supplies are? Help a stranger? Let someone into your home? Believe a rumor? Confront someone you suspect of hiding something? Every decision now has a social cost, and fear changes the calculation. You stop asking, what is the most reasonable explanation? You start asking, what explanation keeps me safest if the worst possibility is true? That sounds like caution, but taken too far, it becomes a trap. On the fifth day, someone puts a barrier across part of the street. The explanation is simple. It's there to stop unfamiliar vehicles. Everyone agrees that security matters. But now visitors have to explain themselves before entering. Then someone begins keeping a written list of houses. Which homes have generators? Which have elderly residents? Which appear occupied? Which have vehicles or other potentially useful resources? The intention is coordination, but without transparency, the same information can feel threatening. People begin wondering, who created the list? Who has access to it? Why are certain houses marked? Suddenly, something designed to improve security has created another source of suspicion. And now the pattern is becoming visible. A defensive measure changes the behavior of everyone around it. Then those people respond. Then you respond to their response. Nobody needs to intend harm for the situation to deteriorate. Everyone can believe they're protecting themselves, and everyone can make the next decision slightly more defensive than the last. At this point, the neighborhood isn't necessarily becoming more dangerous because more people are dangerous. It's becoming more dangerous because fewer people understand what everyone else is doing. There is a reason this happens. Fear narrows attention. When you believe something dangerous might happen, your brain prioritizes information related to that danger. You notice movement, unusual sounds, strangers, changes. But you can also begin overlooking harmless explanations. That doesn't mean fear makes people irrational. It means fear changes what information feels important. And uncertainty makes that effect stronger. If you know exactly what's happening, you can make a decision. If you don't know what's happening, you prepare for possibilities. The problem begins when every possibility starts feeling equally likely. A harmless car becomes a possible threat. A closed door becomes possible evidence. A hidden generator becomes possible hoarding. A quiet neighbor becomes possible concealment. And once suspicion begins, confirmation becomes easier. You remember the strange things. You forget the normal ones. The neighbor who helped you yesterday becomes the neighbor who didn't answer today. The person who was probably tired becomes the person who was acting suspiciously. The ordinary explanation becomes less emotionally satisfying than the dangerous one. Now, the mind isn't simply responding to uncertainty. It's collecting evidence for the story it already believes. The neighborhood doesn't necessarily need everyone to expose their supplies. It doesn't need people to blindly trust strangers. And it doesn't need everyone to behave as though danger doesn't exist. It needs something more basic: reliable communication, clear expectations, shared information, and simple rules established before fear becomes overwhelming. These questions sound boring during normal life. During a prolonged emergency, they can become extremely important. Where can people get verified information? Who checks on vulnerable residents? How are water and medical needs communicated? What happens when rumors spread? Who confirms whether an emergency claim is real? How do neighbors distinguish a genuine security problem from an unfamiliar but harmless event? Because communication isn't just about sending information. It's about reducing uncertainty. And reducing uncertainty reduces the amount of space fear has to fill. There's another lesson hidden inside this story. Privacy is reasonable, but secrecy can become dangerous when everyone assumes everyone else is hiding something. You don't need to announce how much food or fuel is inside your house. You don't need to reveal every weakness. Protecting private information is reasonable, but there is a difference between protecting private information and allowing misinformation to replace communication. You can say, "I have enough for my household, but I don't know how long this will last." You can say, "I heard the community center is distributing water, but let's verify it before we spread the information." You can say, "I don't know who that person is, but let's find out before assuming the worst." Those statements don't eliminate risk. They prevent uncertainty from becoming certainty without evidence. And that distinction matters. Remember the decision you made near the beginning. You stopped telling people what you knew. It seemed like a small decision. You weren't attacking anyone. You weren't stealing anything. You weren't trying to create panic. You were protecting your household. But that decision changed the information available to everyone around you. Your neighbor responded to what they didn't know. Then another neighbor responded to what they believed. Then you responded to their behavior. And slowly, the neighborhood began reacting to assumptions rather than facts. That was the real mistake. Not being cautious. Not protecting your supplies. Not preparing for danger. The mistake was allowing fear to destroy communication before there was an actual reason to stop communicating. Because once trust disappears, every defensive action can look aggressive. And once everyone believes everyone else is a threat, the community can begin creating the very danger it was trying to prevent. The strongest neighborhood during a crisis isn't necessarily the one with the most supplies. It may be the one where people still know what's happening, where information is verified, where rumors are challenged, where vulnerable people are accounted for, where people understand what others are likely to do, where privacy exists without complete isolation, and where caution doesn't automatically become suspicion. Because survival isn't only about what you have inside your house. It's also about the environment surrounding that house. A locked door can protect you from a threat, but if fear causes every neighbor to become a potential threat, you have created a different kind of vulnerability. You have isolated yourself from one of the most valuable resources in any prolonged emergency: other people. When modern systems fail, the first thing people usually think about is what they need to store. Water, food, fuel, medicine, batteries. Those things matter. But there's another resource that becomes harder to replace as a crisis continues: trust. And trust doesn't disappear all at once. It disappears through small decisions. A rumor you never correct. Information you never verify. A neighbor you gradually stop talking to. A harmless action you begin interpreting as suspicious. Eventually, even a defensive measure can make someone else more defensive. Then another response follows. Then another, until nobody remembers exactly when cooperation ended. They only know that everyone started protecting themselves from everyone else. So prepare your supplies. Prepare your backup systems. Prepare for failures. But don't forget to prepare the human system around you, because when the lights go out, uncertainty can spread faster than the darkness. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing a frightened community can do is start guessing what everyone else is thinking. If you want to understand the hidden systems that determine how long modern life can keep functioning when things go wrong, subscribe. Because the next failure may not be the one you expect.